Well, the London system is continuing to treat me pretty well. I had my second week DojoLiga match last night, and then I played another game with it this morning, and I won both of those based on opening prep. And both players played an early D5 and C5, and that's kind of the most testing way to play against the London system if they play D5. And I did do a video on move orders in the London system that covers how white needs to respond to that. There's two different Tabiyas. You can use a triangle Tabiya or the two knights Tabiya. In this video, I use the two knights Tabiya. That's what I'm going to be playing. And I also had a video where I showed my preparation for my first week at DojoLiga. And interestingly, I got white 2 weeks in a row because the boards kind of get shifted around sometimes based on how people perform in the prior weeks. And interestingly, both players, I prepped for this opening the first week, and my opponent didn't end up playing it, but my opponent this week did. So my prep from last week actually paid off this week. So let me just quickly go through the game here and show how my preparation paid off. So I played the London. And then a lot of repertoire books, and probably the most testing way to play against it is to play this early c5. And the idea is that the queen can come out here and put pressure on the b2 pawn because the bishop, our London bishop is no longer protecting it. So in the two knights Tabiya, we play out the two knights out first. And in this game, my opponent did play queen to b6. And how white responds to this is you take on c5, and then you let them grab this pawn down here, and we argue that we'll gain enough time on their queen, and we'll try to open up the position when they're a little bit behind in development and their queen is offside a little bit. Now, in the game, he did not take on b2. But if he did, we play rook to b1. It's not a good move for them to take on a2. We just gain too much time. We can blast this position open. And one of the key ideas, if they do take on b2, or even if they don't, which I'll show you in the game I played, is we have this move where we play c4. We open up the position. We retake with our bishop, or we end up getting our bishop out to that square at some point. We castle, and then we try to gain a bunch of time on their queen. So in the game, he did not actually do that. He took on c5. And then we play a3, and that, is threatening to gain some time on the queen and expanding on the queen side. Now he played this bishop to f4, and I played the thematic c4. And like I said, the idea is we want to quickly get developed and gain some time on his queen. Now he plays this a5 move, and that's not a book move as far as I know. Normally they would probably just take this pawn, or they would play e6. But he played a5, and that does weaken b5. So I spent some time on this move just trying to calculate the optimal way of doing it. I decided just to go ahead with the plan where you just try to gain time on the queen. So that's what I did, is I took, and then I gained some time on the queen and got my bishop developed. So it's kind of like free development for me. He moved back. And my understanding is, for the most part, once you get the c4 blast in and the bishop developed, you want to just get castled quickly. And then my idea would be to get these rooks to the open files, kind of x-ray that queen, try to gain some more time on it, and just try to slowly get a better position. So he played e6, which was not surprising. Now I took a bit of a think here, and I didn't know. I was trying to decide between maybe like bishop to b5, queen to e2. My intuition was to play queen to e2, get my rooks on D1 and C1, and that's what I ended up doing. Now, the good thing about this queen to D2, queen to E2, is I vacate that D1 square for my rooks, which will X-ray the queen. And it's important to note that it supports playing E4. And while maybe I don't want to play that right away, it could be useful at some point. Now the game kind of took a bad turn for black. He played bishop to D6, and that walks into a tactic. It's kind of a common tactic, the central pawn fork. And what it is I can just exchange bishops. And if you notice, if you can imagine, if we had a pawn here, we would be attacking the queen and the knight at the same time. And so we can actually make that happen because we can play this move here. When he moves his bishop away, then we hit him with this pawn fork. So that's what I did in the game, and I'll end up winning a piece because of that. Now, I wasn't the best rested. My opponent wanted to move the game up to last night. It was supposed to be today, and so I had gotten up early in the morning to go golfing and got a bunch of other stuff done. But I was happy to accommodate switching the schedule. But I have to admit, I almost played this puzzle rush style, and what I've really been working on is spending more time looking at all of my opponent's responses, and I kind of let that slip, and there's no excuse for it because it's a 90-minute game. So I actually didn't even consider this. So it hit me. I wasn't too worried because I thought, well, I should still be, I should be fine. So I just spent a little bit of time calculating, and I decided to throw in this bishop to b5. And my idea is either his king will have to move, and then he can't castle, or he will need to move his knight back to d2 to interpose. And then I feel like, well, at least, I'll take his queen at that point, and then at least I've made him lose a little bit of time, or I've gained a little bit of time by making him move backwards. So he decided to play king to f8. I just take on d6. And the rest of the game's not real exciting. It's pretty easy to play for white at this point. This rook isn't in the game, and I'm a piece ahead basically, and I wouldn't even have to hang on to I could give up one of these pawns and I'm still easily winning. But on this move, I decided I wanted to get that bishop off the board because I wanted to try to limit any counterplay he can, rather than making maybe I'm sure the computer finds better moves than what I did here, but I just trying to get the bishops off the board, less chances for tactical shots and counterplay by him. And I decided to even do this because my thought was as well, I'll restrict this from moving up. And I know that if he exchanges, it does hurt my pawn structure a little bit, but then then I have this unopposed knight that'll be pretty useful. So I decided it was worth the structural damage. And I don't think that was a good move because I'm going to be able to jump in here. I just have to cover that pawn. And then my opponent resigned here. So my thought is I'm going to start embracing this two knights Tabiya. And because I'm playing such a kind of a minimalist repertoire, I think I can take on memorizing a little bit in these poisoned pawn London lines where we let them take on b2. And there can be a little bit of memorization involved there. But interestingly, there's a lot of themes or memory markers kind of. So I won't go through stuff in detail, but the strongest way for black to play is to play here. And obviously you wouldn't do this right away or whatever, but kind of ideas you kind of exploit are, pinning this knight, playing the bishop here. Sometimes the bishop will even go to c7 to cut off access to the a5 square, and you kind of pester that queen, and if black isn't careful, you may end up actually trapping it. But there is some memorization involved. But I play the Slav as black, and so I was even considering, like if I played the Slav, but I was even considering if they play the London system with the bishop to f2 move order, I may even consider playing this myself as black and then getting a lot of experience and trying to gain some expertise in this poison pawn and just kind of learn it from both sides, and that way I'll learn it more quickly. I'm all about minimalism, but I think if you can get a lot of easy victories out of something and it doesn't require that much memorization and you can play it on both sides, then I think maybe the squeeze is worth the juice. So I'll show one more game that I had this morning that went along similar lines and why I like this 2 knights Tabiya. So this guy is using the same kind of strategy initially. So I do the 2 knights Tabiya, preparing for this move. But he doesn't actually do that move. He actually played bishop to f5. And it's like, I can see why it's a tempting move from black side, because they don't want to go into these critical waters of this poison pawn London system. But I think white gets pretty easy play and pretty simple play here. So what white does is we take on the c5 thing, c5 pawn, and that's kind of like a common theme too in these positions, is this memory marker where we take on c5. They play e6, then we play knight to d4. And so the idea is they can't take here or we win that pawn. And if they move the bishop away, then we have this move where we pin their knight, and then we just kind of insist on hanging on to this pawn. So the best thing for them to do actually is to take on c5, but then we get in this move here and we just set up our restraint structure. We have the 2 bishops and we've damaged their pawn structure. And so this is like really comfortable, easy to play for white. Our experience in the Scandi and the Slav, and just playing these restraint structures, this is like one of the normal positions we play, but it's kind of on steroids because we've got the bishop pair and we've damaged his pawn structure. And so what's interesting is that after this move right here, white actually scores 32% better than black at club level. So it's just like a really difficult position for white to play. And so that's another like advantage of playing this, taking the bull by the horns and playing this 2 knights Tabiya, where we embrace defending this poison pawn. So this game, it ended real quickly, actually. I set up my restraint structure, and then it was just like I said, it's really easy to play for white. I mean, we develop our bishop, and we develop it with time in a way because he has to defend f5. So I think he did it most efficiently because he at least developed a piece while he did that. Now he is threatening to do this and gain the bishop pair back. So I played h3. Just got castled. And you can see it doesn't look like white has really made any like illogical moves or done anything wrong, yet he finds himself kind of in this bad position. So I decided to blockade his isolated pawn, welcome any trades he wants to make. And then my opponent played knight to h5, which is a blunder. So I could just take it, obviously. I think even better maybe to take here, hit his queen, and then take it. But he just resigned on the spot when he realized that he blundered. And I think part of it, like I've noticed when people get in these kind of tough positions against the London system where it just, like, if you look at his position, like, what does he do? He just doesn't have any, like, good moves to make. And I think that's hard on people's psyche. And so that's why I'm kind of excited about this 2 Knights London. I'm going to put a little bit of time in and memorize the lines where they take on B2. I mean, I've done some studies already, but I'll use the John Bartholomew Chessimple course, and I'll just kind of like prioritize drilling those lines, because like you do want to know what you're doing in those lines, but I do think it will pay off, and it's not a bad thing to explore, and I'm even going to explore it on the black side, I think, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. So I hope if you kind of play some of these openings, I hope that was helpful, and it might give you an idea of something to explore. So anyway, take care.